Hi, Michael Force here again we are on Rise with lesson number 7 here, the Digital Marketing Mastery course. We're going to talk about branding versus branding marketing. Think of Coca-Cola or Apple, something like that. We're going to talk about response-driven marketing, which gets people to buy instantly after they read something or see something. And that's typically what you want as a small business. You don't have time to spend millions or billions of dollars on ad campaigns and hire celebrities. So you're going to have to use copywriting. You're going to have to use different things that I'm going to teach you here in this lesson that are going to break down the difference between the two, answer all the questions around them so you're really clear on the difference between branding and response-driven marketing to make sure that you are getting the highest return on investment for your advertising dollar. That's really the difference between branding and response-driven marketing. So let's break it down in lesson number 7, and I'll see you on the inside. Hello, Michael Force here again. Welcome to lesson number 7 of the Digital Marketing Mastery course. We're with Rise. Today we're going to talk about brand versus response. The age-old marketing question finally answered here. It's really the difference between branding and response-driven marketing or direct response marketing. Let's jump into it here and go over it here. So in the business world today, there are 2 main marketing philosophies, 2 basic approaches to marketing. The first is what we call branding, and the second is what we call response marketing or direct response marketing. In a nutshell, branding is about getting people to remember your name, about getting your name out there in the world. On the other hand, response marketing is about getting people to take action, to go out there and buy your products and services. To provide a further contrast between these 2 philosophies, you can try to think of them as direct versus indirect marketing. The reason it's called direct response marketing has to do with it being based on 2 key ideas that are very powerful when used together. The first is marketing directly to a prospective customer, and the second is asking for a response, a direct response. So we're both marketing directly to our customer and asking for a particular response. On the other hand, branding is indirect marketing, where its intention isn't to generate action at this particular moment. Instead, the intention is to help people remember your name so that when they have a certain need that arises, maybe they'll remember you. Or if they happen to see your store or your service, they may start getting a good feeling in their tummies because they've seen your advertisement several times before. But as for buying from you based on branding, they may consider it or they may not. Now, I'm not saying that branding doesn't work. What I'm saying is that branding isn't usually for startup businesses. Well, actually, it's almost never for startup businesses. It's just for the simple reason that it's ridiculously expensive. Now, Al Rise and Jack Trout say that before going on a branding rampage, you've got to make sure you have at least $1 billion to spend on your branding campaign. Not $1 million, but $1 billion. With a B, simply because that's how much you're going to need to really drive your brand into the minds of your customers. On the other hand, in addition to focusing on responses that push your customer to buy, direct response marketing also allows you to maintain the advantages of branding. So if done right, you're still getting free branding anyways with direct response marketing, since you're talking about your products and services and asking for the response, while these prospects that aren't responding are still seeing your marketing and being exposed to your brand. Now, the objective of a direct response marketing, again, also called response marketing, is also conversion, and not that we call continuation. In professional sales terminology, a so-called continuation is when you set up a follow-up or talk about a follow-up, but don't actually make the sale. On the other hand, in marketing and sales, a conversion is when your prospective customer takes a certain action that converts them from being a prospective customer and turns them into a real customer. In response marketing, we're always aiming for conversion, never for continuation. So, why then is branding so popular, and why is it that everyone thinks that marketing is the same as branding? Well, do they think that it's what you're supposed to do, or to get your name out there and make sure that everyone knows your name? The concept of branding is very, very appealing to what we might call marketing chickens. Basically, most people default to branding or to getting their name out there simply because it's the easy road to take. With branding, you never have to face rejection since you never have to directly ask anyone to buy anything. This is exactly what makes branding a very appealing route for most business owners. With branding, you can always blame someone else when you don't take personal responsibility for sales. Let me say that last part again, because it's crucial for you to understand if you're ever going to become a professional marketer and sell lots of products and services, you can always blame someone else when you don't take personal responsibility for sales. Marketing, selling, and getting customers is the key set of activities. It's the primary money-making activity in your business. And when you don't take responsibility for it yourself, it's always easy to blame others. So for example, if you hire an advertising agency to create a branding campaign, and if you give them thousands, tens of thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they run it with really beautiful pictures of you and your company, and it's really well designed, and then no one calls, well, you can simply lay the blame on them for the failure. It's their fault. But when you take responsibility, personal responsibility for sales, as well as personal responsibility for marketing, and all those activities related to getting customers, in this case, you won't be able to blame anyone else because it was your job to know how to do it in the first place. So branding is the easy road. It's the way that most people want to go. It appeals to the ego. It appeals to status and fame. It appeals to the part of you that wants everyone to know who you are in the world. It also protects the ego from self-perceived failure and rejection. Unfortunately, though, the reality is that branding efforts do not lead to sales for most businesses. But what does lead to sales is direct response marketing. Now, direct response marketing, or response-based marketing, has its roots deep in direct face-to-face selling. The best way to think about a good direct response marketing piece or campaign is to think of it like a real salesperson, only multiplied and automated. The techniques of direct response have been tried, tested, and refined for over the course of more than 100 years, and that is now considered a science by the pros. Claude Hopkins, for example, at the beginning of his book, Scientific Advertising, says that advertising has now reached the level of science, which no longer means just trying things over and over again, hoping that something sticks. It means that when you use the technique in the correct way, we will get the expected result every time. To drive home the point even further, it would be nice for you to know that he wrote these words almost an entire century ago. Remember, the effectiveness of direct response marketing has been tried and tested over the course of more than a century now, and what you'll find is that most of the direct response marketers from Claude Hopkins and David Ogilvy to Eugene Schwartz and so on, all at some point actually conducted direct response face-to-face selling in their lives. Now, how exactly are direct response marketing and face-to-face selling connected? Why is it that the big direct response marketers have often had significant face-to-face selling experiences? Again, the best way to think about good direct response marketing is to think of it like a real salesperson that you're putting inside of your website, video, mailing piece, or whatever, and then sending it out only to qualified prospects, just like you would do when you send a real salesperson to a face-to-face meeting. When you do a face-to-face selling and you learn how it works, you'll come to realize that some things work and some things don't. Regardless, there's a certain process to it. There's always a process that professional salespeople will use to sell. And when you learn this process or system and then you put that sequence into your marketing, that's what gets response. That's what closes sales. And that's what gets conversions. In-person sales is the greatest paid research that you can ever do. Most people are afraid of selling their products and services to face-to-face, but in fact, it's the best possible research anyone can do for their business. You'll never gain so much knowledge and info about your customers that will be as specific, as useful, and as powerful as the knowledge and info you learn while you're selling. Yes, most of us don't like the idea of selling. Most of us are actually trying to do marketing so that we don't have to sell. Oh no, you're telling me that I have to sell? Well, the good news is that when you learn professional sales and learn how to do it like a pro, you'll realize that selling is not manipulative. And the greater news is that when you have the chance to go out and do research, you're going to be making sales while you're doing this research. So you'll actually be getting paid to do it. So you'll be hitting two birds with one little stone. I always recommend to my clients, to my coaching members, and all of my students, as well as my colleagues, that they talk to at least 3 or 4 of their prospects every day, and to ask them what their biggest fears, frustrations, wants, and aspirations are. This information will do wonders in helping to get inside the minds of their prospects. Even better is to look at these 3 or 4 daily conversations as sales presentations, where at the end of your conversation, you'll actually try to sell your product or service. Because then with this knowledge and experience, with whatever meets the road, you'll be able to find out exactly what's stopping your prospects from taking action, which also means you'll find out what their internal objections are and how these objections can be overpowered. Then it's at this point where you'll really get the dirt, the goods, the material, the heavy weaponry, or whatever you want to call it, when you can actually use to help people buy stuff they really want to buy and help them solve their problems. I recommend almost unconditionally that everyone invest every single day for at least a couple of years in their life in talking to prospective customers and selling products and services one-on-one. There's almost nothing better in life that you can do than in doing this, because you will increase priceless insights into how the human mind works. You'll go deep into how our decision-making system works, and you will allow yourself to really understand the needs of your prospects and customers at a level where almost no one else understands them, not even your own prospects and customers. You'll also learn the words, the phrases, and the particular language they use, that they speak among themselves, between themselves, and within themselves. In other words, by doing one-on-one sales, you'll allow yourself to become a marketing powerhouse, overpowering any objections that hit your path, surpassing any limits you set for yourself, and overcoming the obstacles any competitor can throw at you. Now, as I mentioned before, you don't want to just imitate the big companies. Instead, you want to do what the big successful companies did long before, but not what they do now. Don't imitate the big companies or assume that what they do now will work for you. If you want to imitate them, go back to when they began as young startups and do what they did. Don't go out and do what they're doing now and guess what they did when they first started out. What they did when they started out was usually sales. Sales has got a bad name over the past several decades. Professional selling looks nothing like the manipulative hustling that we associate with the used car salesman. Professional selling is about discovering and developing needs and then matching these needs to solutions. For more, I recommend the book Spin Selling by Neil Rackman. If you just go online and type in the spin selling, you'll find the book. It'll be the best 15 or 20 bucks that you could ever invest for learning in sales. The book's based on real research, and it has an excellent methodology that anyone can follow. I've been using it for years and give it my absolute highest recommendation. And basically what Neil Rackman teaches you inside the book is that professional salespeople are not high-pressure closers or hucksters. Professional salespeople are the ones that make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and are more as professional researchers, as problem solvers, and solution providers. When they meet a potential customer, they ask what the biggest problems are with their fears and frustrations. They ask the prospect about the problems that they are causing. They dig very deep. They find out the outcome that the customer would want and what it would mean to have their problem solved. And they let the customer give them all the information they need. And this is really the power of professional sales. And when you look back at what big companies did when they were small in order to become successful, it's usually sales. Sales got a bad name, but unfortunately, when you actually learn professional selling, you'll see that it looks nothing like a manipulative hustle. You'll see that it's really about discovering and developing the needs of your prospect and then matching these needs to solutions. So maybe you can start thinking about the idea of how you're going to be building your customer getting system in your business. And maybe you can open your mind to the idea that from now on, every day, you're going to invest a couple hours of learning about your customers, talking to them, and finding out what their specific fears and frustrations are. You're going to take the time to be asking them the questions to dig deeper, remembering and writing down the words and phrases they use so that you can use them when creating your customer avatar. And then you're going to take this to its highest evolution and actually begin selling your products and services at the end of these customer interactions. You're going to turn them into money-making opportunities, alter them into paid research by taking the discovery process and then adding a little sales pitch at the end. Again, you'll learn more about your customers. You'll learn more about psychology, and you'll learn more about what works and what doesn't. And critically, you'll learn more about how to create a marketing piece that will speak to all of your customers more than any other activity in the world would allow you to ever do. And finally, your first marketing should be in the spirit of direct sales. Don't aspire to have people know your name or be famous. Instead, aspire to have people who have a need to come to you to buy what you're selling. Instead of trying to become a famous brand, work to sell your product to one person at a time. Then replicate this direct response system to grow. In other words, replicate this one-to-one system in your marketing pieces, websites, and videos. What I'm suggesting you do here is that you crawl inside the mind, the emotions, and the thoughts of your prospects that dive deep into their fantasies and behaviors, and crystallize yourself into the secret world of your customer in order that you get familiar with it. You'll have them become a customer anytime you want. And then with this profound understanding of your prospect, you'll be able to ultimately create a customer avatar that you've named, that you've created a dialogue with, and that you've created an experience with, so that anyone that has a need which your product services can engage in dialogue and discussion and go through a scripted process that'll help them make an intelligent, informed buying decision perfectly suited for them. When you take your successful one-to-one sales process and you turn it into a successful direct response marketing system of ads, websites, videos, and follow-up emails, this is when you will get the real power and results of direct response marketing. So make sure you market for response, never for recognition. Make sure you appeal to the interest of your customer, never to your own ego. Don't fall for the chicken's way by thinking that all you have to do is simply throw your name, nicely dice up your picture, mix it in your logo, and toss everything in to make a really fancy salad so that you can get the ego hit. This is not the marketer's way. This is the chicken's way. And in the end, this will get you and your ego very disappointed. Instead, do what works to get response, no matter what it is, and you'll be more successful with all of your marketing endeavors. So let's do another exercise to help get the next step of direct response marketing. Let's dive right in here. There are two fundamental approaches to marketing. The first is branding and getting your name out into the world to become famous so people have you on top of their minds. The second approach to marketing is called direct response or response-based marketing because it is focused on finding individual prospective customers and triggering them to respond to offers. Now, it's absolutely critical that you develop your direct response marketing skills and develop the ability to sell products one-to-one in any situation, niche, or environment. To help you start to do this, go ahead and answer these three questions for this exercise. First, where have you become convinced that branding is synonymous with marketing? Look back in your life and try to identify where this idea came from. If you had any social impressions, cultural impressions, or other sorts of influences that unconsciously convinced you branding was synonymous with marketing, or at least very close to it, then write them down. 2. Where do you have a bias or a prejudice against salespeople and marketers that you must overcome? Make sure you try to identify all these biases and prejudices, since you cannot rid yourself of anything that you don't acknowledge. And finally, number 3, what will you have to do to internally, in order to begin finding prospects where they are, then asking them to buy from you? In other words, what do you have to do on the inside so that you can proactively go out and find prospects where they are, and then look at them in the eye and ask them to buy from you? What are you going to need to do on an internal level to prepare yourself for this? Go ahead and complete this exercise, and I will see you on the next lesson. Take care.